I read 22 books in 2025.
What?
This was a year of extreme variety in my reading. I read fantasy books, I read history books. This was my first year diving into history. I read horror books, I read sci-fi books, I read some thrillers. So now it's time to rank them all. So I brought up a little tier list for you. We're gonna go through from the start of the year to the end of the year. Some of them I wouldn't recommend, and some of them I would recommend very highly. And if you're looking for some places to start in some of these genres, especially history, I've got some great recommendations.
Bro, let's get straight to it. On my mama, we lit.
So to start, January, I started with The Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, Lovecraft is a very famous author. Very famous, problematic, but he also kind of invented the genre of cosmic horror. So I really like the ideas and themes that Lovecraft has in his books. I find it very intriguing. I really love the cosmic horror of it all, the otherworldly, scary nature. But the prose in this book was so bad. It was genuinely unreadable. The ideas that came through the book were very intriguing, but the prose made it a horrible reading experience. It was super dense. It was overly descriptive. The plot focused almost zero on character building. It was purely exposition and set pieces. So while those set pieces and exposition were very interesting, it didn't hold your attention, if that makes sense. So for me, this is going to be a D tier. Would not recommend. This would make an amazing movie. Terrible book. Next up, The Witcher, Sword of Destiny. I was in the mood for some well-paced, gripping fantasy after reading The Mountains of Madness. And this book did it for me. The book was really character-driven and a lot more narrative-focused than the first book. This is the second book in the Witcher trilogy, not trilogy. This is the second book in the Witcher series, by the way. And I felt like this one was a lot easier to follow. I think there was more of a narrative through line through all of the stories. The world is great. I think this is one of my favorite fantasy worlds. Characters are amazing. But, however, I do feel like, so if you don't know, these books are translated from Polish. They're originally Polish books. And I feel like there's a lot that's missed in the translation. I feel like sometimes the stories feel a little bit clunky, or there's metaphors or symbolic metaphors or turns of phrase that just don't quite translate. So I think especially because I listened to most of this on audiobook, I think there was a lot of times where I just got a little lost. I think if I had read more of this physically, I think it would have been better, but I'm going to say A tier. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll always enjoy the Witcher books. And this was, for me, a step up from the first book, just because there was a lot more story there and a lot more character development. Next, we go to the second book in the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I freaking love these books. This is automatic S tier for me. This trilogy is goated. And the second book was more enjoyable than the first because I felt the strength of this series is the characters. They're so fun, they're so witty, they're so cunning, they're so vivid. The way in which the prose enables you to get into the head of these characters and really see them as real people, real nuanced, gritty people is really good. But the first book lacked a little bit of plot. It was mostly just meandering character building, but it was still so freaking enjoyable. And so this one just changed the game. It was goated. It was so enjoyable to read. It had all of the smattering of colorful characters from the first book built into this epic quest and multiple plot lines going on. It was just really enjoyable. I can't say more great things about this book. Fourth book I got to was The Empire of Silence. I had heard a lot about this book. This gets a lot of hype online. This is a sci-fi epic, very space opera, very reminiscent of Dune or Star Wars. I saw a lot of similarities with Red Rising, but for me, this felt kind of flat.
Don't do it to me. I beg you. No.
Definitely B, maybe even C tier. Low B, I think. I found the prose way too meandering. So many things happened, and yet nothing happened. It felt like so many stories intertwined into one story to the point where I wasn't really that invested because so much was changing and happening all the time. I just really didn't get invested in these characters' lives. Well, one character really. It just didn't hit for me. I also found a lot of this kind of unoriginal. I found there's so many like scenes and tropes that paralleled Dune and a lot of the sci-fi greats, and I just I couldn't really overlook it. I know that's not a big thing. Great artists steal, but it just didn't hit for me. So that's going low B. Next book, Royal Assassin. This is going to be another controversial one. This series is so beloved, and I can see why. I think objectively this book is S tier. I think it's amazing. The writing is amazing. The characters are amazing. The depth of the emotions portrayed in this book. The world is so vivid. It's such a classic fantasy. But the problem with it being such an evocative book is that the main emotion that you're gaining through these pages is pure frustration. Fitz is just frustrated the whole book. And it just doesn't make for an enjoyable experience. If nothing good ever happens, it just wasn't the vibe for me at the time. It felt really slow, which I think in this series case, Robin Hobb writes slow really well. The characters really shine, the world really shines when she takes her time and has a methodical approach to development of the story. But this one, I just was frustrated by it, which I think is the point, but I didn't enjoy being frustrated. I felt super connected to the characters, but my connection was like, ah! So that one is B, probably high B tier. I enjoyed it a lot more than The Empire of Silence, to be honest. Next, I started on my history journey. So this is really the first history book, Powers and Thrones by Dan Jones. This is the first history book I've read, probably ever, to be honest, like real history book. And it's an overview of medieval history. So it goes chapter by chapter and breaks down different concepts. So there was a chapter about well, I don't remember exactly what all the chapters were about. This has been a year since I read this, but I remember specifically there was a chapter about like merchants and how merchants getting rich affected the rise of the Renaissance and kind of the breakdown of monarchical structures. There was also a big chapter about monastic life. So monks and monasteries and how they were centers of learning and how there was a lot of money and a lot of economy centered around monasteries and production of goods and books and stuff like that. There was also great chapters on wars and, the Huns and political intrigue. Overall, I found this book really interesting. It really satiated my thirst for medieval history. I felt diving in, I wanted a really broad overview. And in terms of periods of history, medieval history appeals to me the most because it's closest to fantasy, right? Like there's knights and kings and armies. And so this book, problem with history is that it's history, right? So certain aspects of history are going to be a lot more interesting than others. So certain chapters of this book were genuinely fascinating. And then other chapters, as much as Dan Jones's prose is very readable and very approachable, certain chapters just were a little less interesting to me because at this point in my life, when I was reading the book, I'm like, okay, I'm less interested in like the monastic life, even though now I'm quite interested in that. I find that pretty fascinating. But when I was first dipping my toes in, there's certain aspects of it that I wasn't that into. I was more into reading about the battles and the kings and the betrayals and stuff. So I would say very enjoyable. I think this is a great place to start. A really good book, a really great audiobook because Dan Jones himself does the narration and it's really good listen. But a great book to kind of get an overview and see what chapters stick out to you. Like, if you really like the chapter about the Crusades, then your next step is, I'm going to read a history book dedicated to the Crusades. So it's a great sampler. It's like a tasting platter of different topics. So I'll put this in high B. I thought it was pretty good. Next is another S tier. Storm of Swords, third book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. And this one just brought it all home. I think everything was working in this book. All of the plots were firing on all cylinders. I was very invested in each of the characters. I felt that this book is where it really started to divulge from the show. Specifically, so I was seeing some new facets being displayed of characters that I hadn't quite grasped in the show, specifically Jorah and Melisandre. They're a lot more, every character in the book is a lot more layered than they're portrayed in the show. And I think that sung in this book specifically. Just the pacing was great. Great book. Okay, second history book of the year. Plantagenets, also by Dan Jones. So this is an overview, again, of medieval history, but this is specifically about the Plantagenet dynasty that ruled medieval England. I think it was from 12th to 13th or 12th to 14th century. So it spans this whole line of kings. I found this book really interesting. Once again, I think, it's history, so certain parts are going to be a lot more interesting than other parts. But this book had that narrative through line where you're going down through the line of kings and you're kind of seeing how things progress that I think was missing in Powers and Thrones. So I enjoyed this one more. I would say low A. It was really good. There are certain parts that dragged for sure, but overall, I think it kept a really nice story-like structure to the book, which is really what I look for in a history book. I think the closer a history book can be to being a story, the more approachable it is for me. Right after that, I did my third history book of the year, which was Children of Ash and Elm, which is a new history of the Vikings by Neil Price. This one was not good. I believe Neil Price is primarily an archaeologist, and so he attacked the topic of the Vikings through an archaeological lens, and that just didn't work for me. Each chapter was presented almost like a Wikipedia page. There was zero narrative through line. There was no narrative in this at all, hardly any plot. It was almost a selection of facts each chapter that were tied together in a category. So one chapter would be about like burial rituals. And the primary methodology through which we explored these facts about Vikings was through archaeological findings. And while the findings were really interesting, the book itself was dry, just really dry. So I'm gonna give this a C tier. Next was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This was a fun, quick thriller. It wasn't too deep. The ending felt a little rushed, but overall, it gave me the same. I'm always chasing the high of The Only One Left by Agatha Christie. I think that's the perfect thriller book. It feels like a game of Clue. Like it's got that vibe, and I think this gave that vibe. It's an old, creepy, but ornate house and uncovered family mysteries and drama. It was really good. It kept the pace and the tension all the way through. I felt the ending was a little rushed, a little too much was going on, but it was a very enjoyable palate cleanser. So I'm going to put it B tier. Next, The Shining. This one needs no introduction, but it kind of fell flat for me. I just felt that it wasn't very scary. The character development was great, but I didn't really feel a sense of tension. And I felt like the buildup was way longer than it should have been. Especially the Danny chapters. A little kid has like chapters following his POV. I just found those chapters really, really hard to stick with. Something about the prose or the psychedelic nature of it, it just felt like a chore to get through. So C tier, kind of surprising. I haven't seen the movie. I hope to watch it and I hope it gets a lot better. Oh, in August I read Rubicon. This is the GOAT history book. If I can recommend one history book to start, it's this one. And this is a timeline of the fall of the Roman Republic. So when it stopped kind of being a democracy, well, a republic, and then moved into empire. So right when Julius Caesar dies, Caesar Augustus takes over, becomes the first emperor of Rome. And Tom Holland, who's the author of this, he hosts a podcast, The Rest is History. It's one of the top history podcasts on Spotify. And I just found the way that he described these events was so evocative. I loved his ability to pull in maybe some rumor or frivolous stories that may not be fact, but blend them into the narrative in such a way that it really increases your appreciation for the characters that are involved in this story. He also was really good at weaving in like certain details or scenes that helped you really understand how the society worked at the time. So I remember so vividly, like in some of the beginning chapters of the book, he talks about the rich Romans' vacation homes that they had in, I forget what city it was, but they were like super into oyster farming and oysters became this massive thing and they were super into eating oysters. Anyway, it's just like, he did a great job of preserving the narrative here. I felt like it was almost a gripping read, combined with the fact that all of the characters here are massive blockbuster names. You get Caesar, you get Pompey, you get Mark Antony, you get Cleopatra. And so learning the real history behind these figures who you've heard about your whole life was just so fun. I would recommend this book to anyone, history reader, someone who hasn't read a book. Like, this is just an amazing book. And it's really not too long. I think it's like 300 pages. So huge. This will spike your Roman history obsession. Goated. Next was The Housemaid. My review for this that I put on Fable was short and sweet. I said fun and exciting. And that's what it was. I think it was actually even a little better than The Only One Left. It was a little twisted, a little freaky, just a fun read. Great thriller palate cleanser. I'm sure it's probably the most popular book that I read last year, but a good, solid book. High B tier. I think I enjoyed it more than Royal Assassin, but less than Powers and Thrones. Ooh, next, The Will of the Many. This one got a lot of hype last year, and I think rightly so. This book was great. High A tier. Amazing book. Roman-inspired fantasy. There's so much buzz about this book. Just check it out anywhere. It's great. I have yet to read the second one, but it's on my list this year. After that, I did a little palate cleanser called Double Indemnity. It was I think it was like less than 100 pages. I think it was like a 60-page novella. Very like sleuthy detective noir 1950s vibe, or not 1930s, 1940s vibe. If you ever seen the movie Chinatown, that's like this book is that. It was about an insurance agent who's, I think, having an affair with this lady, and they were planning to murder her husband. Anyway, it was just really interesting. I thought the prose was really great, really plotting. If you ever want to get in that like, broody detective vibe, this is a great book. Really easy read. You could read it in a day. Fun one. Then I read The Demon King. This was a recommend from some of my family. This is okay. Honestly, it was a good fantasy, but it was really YA. It's really geared toward a YA audience, and I felt it was a little juvenile in parts. So for me personally, I'm almost tempted to put it in like a C tier, but I think it would be the perfect book for someone younger, or if there's nostalgia involved. It was a great listen. I didn't want to read this one because I knew I wasn't going to like it as much, so I just listened in the background. It made for some good commutes to work. So low B tier. I think I enjoyed Empire of Silence more. This whole early fall period, September, October, I was in a very big like pulpy fantasy. I picked up Dragon's Bottom Twilight. This is like an 80s super mass market fantasy. And I was in the vibe for something like that. I was in the vibe for D&D, a little hokey 80s fantasy, but this book wasn't that good. There were parts of it that were amazing. There's this like, pair of twins in the books, and the one is this decrepit wizard figure who has this like dark past, and his brother is this noble knight who protects him, and their dynamic is really interesting, but they featured these, I forget what the name was, they featured these little like, dwarf-like characters. Kinders, they're called Kinders, but they're supposed to be super dumb, or they're supposed to be really dumb creatures, and I just found it just didn't work. It was like more silly and annoying than anything, and that's not really what I was looking for. I was looking for like a fun, fantastical adventure, and you could really feel how dated it was. But I think I'll still read the rest of the series. I think there's some of the concepts here that really did it for me. If I'm in the mood for like a mindless, pulpy fantasy, I think I'll dive back in and read the book about the wizard brother, because there are some things that were fun and really classic fantasy, and there are some things that just pulled me out that were really dumb. Overall, kind of dumb book. And then I read The Blood of the Elves. This was probably the weakest book in the Witcher series for me. I had a hard time getting through it, to be honest. The plot. The problem with these books is each separate story is actually really enjoyable, but then when they lump all of them together, the plot has a hard time shining through, and so you just keep switching from like different area to different area to different character to different character, and it's like you have a hard, like once you finish one story, there's not a lot of motivation to keep reading, and I found that especially with this book. I love the Witcher world, but this one specifically just wasn't enjoying as much. And then rounding out my little fantasy era, I read Justice of Kings. This book was good. This book was really good. Low A tier. It was kind of a dark fantasy, a little more grounded, about almost like this inquisitor who goes around, who's on the errand of the emperor, who goes around rooting out basically their equivalent of like pagan beliefs. So this old magic that's forbidden in the land or whatever. And this book was really enjoyable. I got the game Tainted Grail at the same time, and the vibes really worked together. It's kind of spooky. I also was reading this at the tail end of October, so it was just a great vibe. Spooky, darker fantasy, but still kept it grounded. Think of like the Night's Watch in Game of Thrones. The black cloaks and the kind of gritty atmosphere. That was this book. I thought it was great. And it has some elements of Lovecraftian horror. It has these otherworldly, demented gods that are kind of seeping through. You didn't get much of that in this book, but I've heard that kind of transforms into that sort of series in the next 2 or 3 books. So I'm going to be interested. I think I'll probably save this for October and get into some Lovecraftian, Cthulhu, tentacly fantasy. I think that'll be really enjoyable. Then I got into a sci-fi era. I read both Children of Time and We Are Legion at the same time. Children of Time, A tier. This book was amazing. I don't even know how to describe this book. It was such a unique, if you're looking for a really unique sci-fi with great characters and with really interesting ideas that I really haven't seen before, this was it. This is not really spoilers, but it's about a failed experiment where humanity has developed this virus that artificially enhances the speed at which species evolve. And they are trying to develop human life on different planets. So they send this barrel of monkeys down on a ship with this virus. And the virus is supposed to infect the monkeys once they get down. And basically the experiment goes awry and the monkeys never reach it. But the virus gets down and infects this species of spiders. And so this spider species develops sentience. And it's just so interesting. The whole book is about humanity trying to reconcile with this spider civilization, and it kind of tracks the spider civilization as they evolve and shows you at different periods of their civilization, because the human ship is moving closer to them. So you get, like, it's space travel, so you get huge chunks of time. So they go into cryosleep for 100 years, and then we revisit the spiders and we see how much they've grown. Anyway, fascinating book. Probably one of the best sci-fis I've ever read. We Are Legion was a really fun read. A tier. It's a little dumb at times, but it's about this guy whose consciousness gets uploaded into a AI ship, and so he is the ship, and he gets sent off on this mission, and it's just funny. It's mainly a funny book. Then it's narrated in a way that's very casual. It's like a Redditor is narrating his journey through space, and it's just fun, but it draws in some really interesting concepts about politics and humanity and how humans deal with crises and what makes us feel human and what little aspects of comfort can we have in a space, in cold space. So I found it really fun. The audiobook is really great for this one too. I listened to this book while I was reading Children of Time. That was a great pairing. I really had a great sci-fi era. I played a little Starfield, watched some Star Trek, super enjoyable. And the last book I read in 2025 was The Norman Conquest by Mark Morris. I've got a video going into a TV show that I watched that was based off of this history. So go and watch that. But this book I felt was great. Low A tier. Like I said with history, certain chapters are going to be inevitably more interesting than others, but I felt this was a great overview of the whole conquest. I felt like the drama and the characters really shone through here. If you're looking for an early medieval history book that preserves a sense of narrative, this is it. I think almost until 80% of the book, I felt like I was reading a fiction book in a way. There's just so much story, and the actual history is so crazy, so many betrayals, so much drama. The last 20% of the book was about the Doomsday Book, which was this huge record that he commissioned over England. So it's like a history about an accounting record. So the last 50 to 70 pages, a little bit of a slog. But the whole preceding 300 or 400 pages were amazing. So that was my 2025 in books. I'm halfway through my first book of 2026, The Middle Kingdoms. So I'll put a review up on the channel of that super soon. So probably up by the time you're watching this. So go ahead and watch that. And if you are looking to experiment with any genres this year, put it in the comments. What do you want to read? What do you want to branch out to this year? And I'll try to answer with a book I think I have a recommendation for. Because this year was my year of experimenting, and I feel like I found some books, or even that I read some books that set me up for other books, if that makes sense. If you want to get into history, I know what to recommend you. If you want to get into thrillers, I feel like I have a good sense of what to recommend. If you want to get into sci-fi, depending on what you're looking for, I feel like I have a good sense of what book is going to do it for you.